The girl was exploring the Brazilian jungle by herself. But then her face suddenly became tense. There was a strange old woman sitting in front of her. She beckoned the girl over. But the puzzling thing was, how did the old woman know there was someone behind her without turning around? It was a strange sight. Emma decided to get out of there. Then she went to the foot of the hill to eat. She asked the vendor who the old woman was. The vendor told Emma not to mess with her, because the old woman was known as the local witch. If she touches you, she'll bring you bad luck. But Emma didn't leave immediately. She came to Brazil from America to experience something different. After eating, she went back to the valley. From a distance it looked like the old woman hadn't left. She walked carefully to the old woman's side. But when the old woman turned around, Emma was startled. The pupil of her left eye was blue.
Te falaram pra não vir. Por quê?
Porque eu não estou com medo.
The old woman smiled at Emma's explanation. Since you're not afraid of me, I'll give you something. She told Emma to make 3 wishes for her life. But Emma was surprised. This was the first time they had met. Why did the old woman know her name? And she seemed to know all about her conversation with the vendor. The old woman didn't explain. She picked up a red string. She told her that the wish could be now, later, or in the future. Then Emma closed her eyes and prepared to make a wish.
Cuidado com o que você deseja, Emma.
Emma's wish was completed when the old woman tied the 3rd knot.
Sim.
The sound of her laughter sent chills down Emma's spine.
Não corta!
Then she ended her trip to Brazil, sending a text message to her boyfriend Apollo. Said her flight would arrive in the US at 12 o'clock midnight. She wanted him to be the first person she saw when she got off the plane. Apollo had mixed feelings when he saw the message. He'd been chasing Emma for 3 years and he'd finally gotten results. He arrived at the airport a few hours early. He was getting sleepy by the end of the day. Emma had just stepped out of the airport. She saw a familiar figure lying on a bench not far from her. This meeting was the beginning of a true union, but it was also the beginning of bad luck, the red thread on her hand. But when her boyfriend heard the story, he took out a knife. He didn't believe in goddesses. But as the string fell to the ground, the godmother on the other side seemed to sense something, but Emma didn't realize it. She'd fallen for her boyfriend's rhetoric. He told Emma that if she was with him she could make as many wishes as she wanted. 300 wishes. Emma was impressed by his sincerity. She married him in a flash. But she didn't know. The gears of fate had begun to turn without her realizing it. A few months later, they had a child. And that was the beginning of their nightmare. They were meeting a friend for dinner at a restaurant. But not long after, Emma went to the bathroom because she didn't feel well. But no sooner had Emma left, her best friend secretly told the man. His wife had taken a lot of nude photos. They were displayed in a gallery in Norway. And she knew about the red string. And that if the rope was cut, bad things would happen. Now Emma's 2 wishes have come true. To marry the man she loves. And to have a lovely son. Just as her best friend was about to make her 3rd wish, she was interrupted by a waiter.
Sir, it's your wife. Your wife needs you.
This woman is in labor. But there's no way to get through the traffic in the city. The man takes his girlfriend to the subway station. He's going to take the subway to the hospital. But as soon as they stepped into the train, a group of street performers came in. Loud music and intense pain. It made the pain even more unbearable for her. With Emma moaning in agony, a strange scene appeared. The lights inside began to fade in and out. The subway came to a stop in a blur of light and darkness. The man noticed 3 lines displayed above the car. Believing in something you don't understand brings pain. As if they were meant for him. But the man doesn't take it seriously. Then his wife gave birth to a son on the subway. But the moment the baby was born, the subway light suddenly went on. They didn't know. This moment of happiness was the beginning of their suffering. 6 months after the birth of their son, strange things began to happen. Emma was at work when she received a text message from her husband. The text was a picture of her husband holding their son. But the strange thing was that the photo was taken from a 3rd person's point of view. When Emma tried to look at the photo after work, it had disappeared. At first Emma didn't give it a second thought. But a few days later she received another photo from her husband. This time her husband had grabbed her son's head. He was hanging him in the air. She didn't understand why he was doing this. But the next moment the photo disappeared again. She came home and asked her husband why he did it. Why he took the picture and then deleted it. Her husband was confused. He had been taking care of his son all day. He didn't have time to take any pictures. Emma grabbed her husband's cell phone. She thought he was lying to her. But when she picked up the phone and looked at it, she realized there were no pictures of her son. Her husband thought she was tired. That she was hallucinating. But Emma knew in her heart. She saw it with her own eyes. This woman always gets a nasty bite from her son when she's breastfeeding him. She thought her son was sick. So she took him to the doctor. But the doctor examined him and told her it was impossible. Her son was only 6 months old. He doesn't even have teeth. He wouldn't feel any pain even if he bit. The woman couldn't believe it. She wondered if she was mentally ill. On the way home, Emma couldn't stand it any longer. She'd had enough of all this weirdness. She even thought it was her 6-month-old son. The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt.
Ay, no, tú eres el diablo, ¿cierto? Fue lo que pensé. ¡Hágase a un lado!
She ran across the street. She took it out on the road. When she got home, she left her son with her husband. She went straight to her room and locked the door. But then her cell phone rang again. And this time as expected. It was the same picture from an unknown number. For this scene, the woman was not as confused as before. Instead, she laughed like a madwoman. It seemed that she already had the answer to her previous doubts. The next day, the husband had the happiest moment of his life. His son was calling him dad. The man took out his cell phone to record the scene. But Emma didn't show any joy. Instead, she said she'd go to a priest to exorcise her son. The husband was furious. He thought it was his wife, not his son, who should be exorcised. He advised her to see a doctor. The woman didn't argue with him. She went straight to the door. As she left, she said to her husband,
You don't see.
The woman didn't go to the doctor. She went to a dimly lit apartment. She rang the doorbell of a house. The owner of the apartment saw her and handed her a heavy bag. The bag was full of chains. A few days later she returned home.
God, forgive me.
A depressed Apollo came to the church and asked the priest for help. The priest told him to take part in a mystery first. And so he sat in the pews. He thought it would be an ordinary storytelling session. But soon he heard horrible things. A woman said she always received pictures of her daughter and grandparents. She had no idea who was taking them. Then she pulled out a print. She even said there were many more in different places at different times. But here's the weird part. When she tried to show them to her husband, they just disappeared. It was the only evidence she had. The only thing she got out of it was her husband saying you should take your pills. The same thing happened to Apollo and he was a bit dumbfounded. The woman later said she joined a mom's group online. With the help of wise man she found a way. She didn't know if she could do it. Apollo gets up and says the woman will kill the baby.
Va a matar a su bebé. Y si no haces algo para detenerla ahora mismo, no podrás decir que no lo sabía.
Oye,
Apollo loses it and storms out the door. He suddenly remembers his wife saying the same thing.
Un bebé. No es un bebé.
Soon after he calmed down he went to a cafe with a friend. He suddenly sees the video recorded on the man's cell phone. Watching it again he noticed two keywords. One was mom's group. And wise man. The two men realized that the word wise man seems to have a special meaning. After a bit of searching they found it in a book. Wise man meant witch. He also remembered the red rope incident that Emma had told him about when she returned from her trip. He had been the one who had cut the cord so recklessly. He suspects that his wife may have been affected by unknown forces. Apollo, the man with the same name as the sun god, vowed to find his wife.
Brujas.
It's all about a red string tied around the wrist. What started out as a happy family came to an end. Emma found herself surrounded by strange happenings. But when she went to talk to her husband, she was told to take her medication. Already mentally ill, Emma listened to wise man. She wanted to punish the evil that had destroyed her life. And that demon was her baby, barely a year old. Returning to her front door she made up her mind. The husband woke up chained to a pipe by Emma. The blood on his face was evidence of an earlier attack. A kettle of boiling water buzzed in the kitchen. As the man screams for help, Emma comes out of the room. Her hair was disheveled and she looked like a ghost. Emma does not respond to her husband's pleas for her to leave the children alone. To Apollo's horror she walks to the kitchen at a strange pace. And the story began. Emma was on a trip before her wedding. She was given a red string by an old woman in the mountains. She made Emma wish for 3 things before tying her in 3 knots. She told Emma that her wishes would come true when the rope fell off naturally. But not to break it. But they were too young to take it seriously. Apollo even cut the rope with a knife. And that's when all the weirdness began. The scene changes. A reporter on TV was showing them the news. Husband seriously injured. The child is dead. The woman is missing. That was the end of the story. But then he remembered the child's screams. Apollo vowed to kill Emma. Once he was able to move he went to Emma's flat with a gun. He asked the men if they knew where Emma was hiding. He didn't believe that a person could just disappear. But then a woman screamed in terror. The woman's screams caused Apollo to lose control of his emotions. Luckily the good man still had a shred of sense. He only fired a shot at the high glass. At that moment the paralyzed woman said, "I want my mommy." These words brought Apollo to his senses. He falls to the ground and cries.